Twice if you want to.
Alright, well, my name's Chris Holly. I'm electronics engineering tech major. I'm black. I prefer to be, I like my pronouns to be like very masculine, like he-man, Arnold Schwarzenegger masculine. I really don't care, but, and I think my favorite piece of black culture would have to be just like I want to say like when we come together as a community, it's like very very inspiring. I know other people they come together in times of whatever, but it's like when you go to like a lot of different organizations and etc. You feel a real sense of community with other blacks and social gatherings and stuff like that. So yeah. Hey there, sir. You want to state your name and your major, pronouns, and what's your favorite
Stephen Hawes, majored in being awesome. What's up?
Yeah.
Thought for sure you're gonna say chicken tenders.
No, I hate chickens. They're very tasty though.
Do you guys have a clicker? Hey, Carrie, come over here, please.
Sure, bro.
Thanks.
Am I not important enough? Okay. Chris, you missed her.
He was wild.
Oh,
What's wrong with you, man?
State your name, your pronoun, adjective, whatever,
Okay.
and your major and your favorite piece of black culture.
Okay, I'm Crystal. I prefer feminine pronouns. I'm majoring in corrosion engineering. And my favorite part of black culture is probably the fact that February is Black History Month, so I can focus on that instead of like Valentine's Day and how sad and lonely I am.
Oh,
So yeah,
there you go.
it is February, right?
Okay.
Okay, so I'm like, I got that wrong.
What's that?
Yes.
You hear F5
Yes.
slideshow? Alright, switch. Shut down. And alright, so I'm gonna begin this. So today's presentation is going to be atheism and religion in the black community. Now this is a famous black atheist. If you haven't noticed, his name is Frederick Douglass, and he's spoken quite a bit about atheism or like Christianity's role in Black America throughout his lifetime. Next slide, please. Alright, so first I want to start off with my story. I want to tell you guys about me first and foremost because I'm black and I'm atheist, which is might seem like an oxymoron to some people, but so I'm 21 years old and I was raised by my mother, short one right there. So I was raised by her, and I came from a household that wasn't very religious, but then I started to get into trouble. I was probably like in 9th or 10th grade, with doing some rather bad stuff. So one of the ways that I sort of like changed my ways was I got involved in the church. And it was a chapel, it wasn't even a black church, but I've been to quite a bit of black churches growing up. So I have quite a bit of experience going to church, unfortunately. And when I became an atheist, which was my freshman year in college, I read the Bible between the summer of my freshman, or before the summer of my freshman year, I read it, and just like, whoa, that's just fucking crazy. And a lot of stuff in the Bible just didn't make sense to me. Even from a young age, I was like, no nonsense. I was sort of more mature for my age, or what my age was. You couldn't just tell me something out, and you're not going to tell me something and then think I'm going to believe it automatically. I want to, be very critical about it. Like, I stopped believing in Santa Claus way before everyone else. So, how the fuck is this fat dude coming to my house, damn near dropping off these presents to everyone in the world? I'm like, yo, in the North Pole is like there's a fucking ice glacier. I'm like, that's the way I thought even back then. So yeah. And then also one of my sisters, even though unfortunately they're 12 now, even though one of them or both of them go to Catholic school. This one right here is an atheist, and I'm still, she's starting to become less and less religious the more and more she's in Catholic school. So, yes, you have a question up there?
Yes, just out of curiosity, just because the door is open. Do you mind speaking a little louder?
I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry about that, guys.
Close the doors.
Yeah, you close the doors, please? Thank you, sir. See? Oh yeah, and I also have a YouTube channel called college.tv. We're talking about a whole bunch of stuff. Sorry, we're having technical difficulties.
Short.
Don't make doorways the way they used to.
Short.
You talking about short people back there? You want to come down? You want to come down here and say that?
And then,
Weather's nice
oh, I'm
down
sorry.
here.
Well, I was going to just talk about the other people in the picture. And then that's my grandfather and my grandmother. And that's my girlfriend and me, who's right there. We went to DC. Okay. Alright, so let's look at some statistics real quick. 88% of African Americans are religious. 85% are Christians. And only 1% of them identify as Muslims. Out of the 12% who are not, or this is actually religiously affiliated, the unaffiliated, meaning that they don't have like a affiliation with a major church group, 12% of them are unaffiliated, and then out of that 12%, 8% of them are religiously unaffiliated, and only 1% are agnostic, and 0.5% are atheists, which is fascinating. So
You're a rarity, can I collect you?
huh?
You're a rarity, can I collect you?
I know, I was just
I
thinking.
don't know, but I might be that star Pokemon card for
Yeah.
so,
Just for clarity, is that in the United States?
the United States,
Okay.
yes.
Can I collect you?
And also, a lot of the countries in Africa are very religious as well. Some of the most religious, in terms of percentage-wise of population in the world. So, yeah. So why do you think blacks are more religious than other races? Let's start with these questions.
They got more soul.
Right there.
Okay,
There you go.
well, historically, groups that are oppressed by a certain characteristic, they tend to be more religious because like with blacks, for example, in the past, they're subjected to this awful cruel institution of slavery, and religion can offer consolation and hope. Even if things aren't really going that well now, as long as you have faith, you can get to something maybe better in the afterlife, or you can pray and get some gratification there. But privileged groups like whites, they don't really need that consolation because they live in a world that privileges them, so they don't really need any kind of consolation.
I know. I'll just work back and then go back this way.
Going also off of that, which said almost everything that I was going to
Should've
say.
done
Essentially, tying into that, the more privileged groups also have more access to education and books, and those who are uneducated don't really know any better. They don't know how to look for a more what you could call a more educated guess when it comes to approaching the world. So their views tend to be far different when you're based only on knowing religious and spiritual means for finding logic and reason in the world, rather than, oh, that rain's, it basically gathered up as vapor, and then once it becomes too heavy, it falls. Rather than seeing it as, uh-oh, we pissed the gods off, so now they're going to strike us down with lightning bolts. So.
Alright, who wants to go next? Oh, you right there, please.
Just to kind of extend on what Kaylee explained before and how that has translated to modern time today, especially in a time where most marginalized groups are able to rise up within this country here, not saying all the time perfectly, but they are able to, but without that they haven't actually left that religiosity behind it. That makes sense. So it goes along with what you explained too, the community, and based on, I'm not black, I'm Latina, so heavily Catholic I'm white. So I do understand the whole community aspect, and they feel that no matter what they come from, whether they actually did succeed in going to the system, they're able to let's reunite again based on that one identity.
Who wants to? I saw a hand back there.
Yeah, just basically the same point. It's probably just the whole community thing, and if you go outside of that, you might be shunned or,
Hard to survive.
yeah. That's when everyone gets together and talks and.
Any other hands? Okay, back there. Well, one of the biggest reasons is history, the history of this country, and the slave trade. Basically, during slavery in the United States, which lasted from about the time, about the 1600s to the conclusion of the Civil War, or after the emancipation of the nation. And one of the ways, hold on a second. Oh, but even though Christianity played a large role in the slavery of African Americans. Slavery has been around since way before the transatlantic slave trade. But the brutality and mistreatment that was brought forth during that time period the severity of it has never been seen before, such as with the slavery in America. So basically, the slaves that are brought over from West Africa basically worshiped like tribal gods, such as what the Native Americans, or similar to the Native Americans, would have worshipped. And then also an estimated 10 to 15% of them were Muslims due to Muhammad most of North Africa, or his descendants in most of North Africa. And also with the Bible was used as a tool to sort of like mentally condition slaves into thinking that their enslavement was acceptable. It's like you're brainwashing a victim to, even though they're being mistreated, they're being whipped, you're being raped, your families are being separated. Some of the worst things that can ever happen to you. It's like because they were brainwashed by this Bible, they find it acceptable. So, here. And just to reiterate the slavery, a lot of the justifications for slavery were found in the Bible. You can just go off some of the quotes that were in the Bible. A lot of the slave masters would like wear the Bible passages. They would whip their slaves while holding a Bible, and they would quote these passages. These are like sort of summarizations of it. But I mean, like, in Leviticus it talks about you can buy and sell slaves. You can sell, daughters into slavery. You can buy a female slave for yourself or your son. If you don't like her, you can sell her again, but not to foreigners. You can rape captive women, but you cannot resell them as slaves. You will not be punished for killing your slaves as long as they die immediately. Slaves must submit to their masters, even if their masters are harsh. So a lot of the stuff that the slave masters would, the way they would subjugate their slaves to the extent they did during slavery was by telling them that this is the right religion and, this is what you should believe in. A lot of them, due to the fact that either you believe in Jesus, or how do I say this? Either you believe in the love of Jesus or you get whipped. And I mean, so that's pretty much how it was back then, bro. You have a question?
No, I'm just gonna comment, I think, sometimes you'll hear, well, no, you're taking that verse out of context, Christians, didn't actually believe that, but really, you see a lot of those things, historically, with slavery in the United States, it was perfectly acceptable for you to, rape your female slaves. It was, if you killed a slave, nobody even questioned it or made a big deal out of it at all, it wasn't anything, you weren't press charges or anything, so you do see it reflected in real life.
And I've seen an example of that thing you were talking about where they used the Bible to justify it. I think it was a story written about someone in South Africa. It was based on true events, and there were two little kids, and one of them was white and one of them was black, and this white woman and this black man were talking, and they're like, isn't it kind of strange that one of these boys is going to grow up to be a slave and the other one's going to grow up to be this rich owner of land and stuff, and they're like, yeah, but it's what God wants, and it stuck with me because I'm like, that's so fucked up,
Any other comments? Alright, so then also continuing with Black history, after from the Reconstruction era to the 1960s, you have a rise in racism, and one of the groups that perpetrated a lot of this was the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. They are a Christian terrorist organization. I mean, you would have people who would try to vote. Their businesses might be prosperous, whatever. And this Christian terrorist group, they would go around in the middle of the night with bed sheets and lynch people. They would rape people. And a lot of the things that they would use to justify for segregation come from the Bible. A lot of the stuff within the Bible about the chosen people, the Israelites, and then also they used stories about God created different races or some shit like that. But so this group, which is actually, I think they're Protestant, because I know that they didn't allow Catholics into their organization until later. But and also During this period, you also have the Harlem Renaissance, which saw the rise of many black free thinkers and atheists, which it was shocking when I was doing a little research on this. But one of the most notable ones were Herbert Harrison, who was a prominent activist in his community where he actively spoke out against religion. That's actually a typo. And when he would give these speeches, a lot of times he would be ran out of town because, you know, not only are you black, but, you know, you're giving lectures criticizing religion. And back in those days, you know, that can be a very dangerous job, so. Alright, so let me talk about the black church as a community, sort of like the center of a community. The black church, even though they have there's a lot of bad things that happen in the black church and a lot of, I'll get to that later, but, so some of the good things that the black church does is that, well, from the get-go, from the, you know, even back during slave times, one of the few times or the only places that blacks can actually organize in groups or, you know, congregate in groups without getting in trouble was during Sunday on church. Back in those days, blacks weren't allowed to be in groups of more than like 3 or 4 alone with each other. And one of the ways that they plotted their escapes from you know, the plantation or wherever they were at was at church on Sundays, you know. So they would have a lot of mixed messages. They would use like the Bible hymns and stuff like that to say that, oh, this is a underground railroad location, and they would use, so a lot of this stuff with the Underground Railroad actually happened at church on Sundays. Also, a lot of the civil rights leaders of the 50s and 60s were mainly Christian pastors or ministers of the Nation of Islam. And even today, many of the black churches do tons of community outreach, such as GED programs, HIV testing, you know, like low-interest loans for impoverished families, things in that manner. So there is a lot of good things that come out of the black church. So, what do you do if the people who have loved and helped you the most are truly hypocritical Christians? This is a question that Carrie came up with. Yes, Rob?
Question about the question. What is a hypocritical Christian?
Someone who calls himself a Christian but doesn't believe like verbatim what's in the Bible, who actually disagrees with much of what's in the Bible.
Alright, so a non-literalist.
Okay.
Alright.
Oh, I thought you were going to.
You love and help them back. It's regardless of what philosophy, theologies they have. They took that courtesy to love and help you and be part of that. That's independent of what they believe. It's just like, accept the fact that they did help you. And I had struggled with that earlier in my life. So regardless of they don't believe what I think or what I see or what I do, that doesn't mean I should exclude them completely. Does that make some sense? Because they have helped me. And I know that I will return that back.
Understood.
Alright, well, this was Carrie's question, by the way.
He asked me about the question for his presentation, so
What would you do?
What do I do?
Yeah.
I mean, this is very true to my story. So basically, like, my grandparents are Christian, and they tell me to pray and things like that. And honestly, I haven't summoned up the courage yet to tell them, like, listen, I'm an atheist, so they don't really know yet. But the truth of the matter is, because of what they've done for me in my lifetime, the main reason why I haven't said anything is because of anxiety within the family. Like, my grandma, she has diabetes, and like stress like that can really affect her physical health. So I don't say anything. And then my grandpa, he's the only one there constantly to, like, you know, help her through things, so I don't really like have stress for him. So I guess my main reason is because I don't want to stress out my family. But truly, if you're not in that kind of situation, and it's my opinion that you should be able to, like, especially if they love you and they care for you, to be able to come out and say who you are.
Pretty much the main people who had loved and helped me the most were my grandparents, and they weren't hypocritical Christians at all. But there were people who had been caring. I wouldn't necessarily say loving, but caring and very helpful people. Despite the fact that I was very self-sufficient, even at a young age. And I think the only thing it really does is it doesn't make me really do anything more, because I do what most Christians don't, and I act upon my empathy and I try to do unto others that I would want to have done to myself. But the only thing that I've noticed it's ever done is when someone happens to help me, regardless of the reasons, and they happen to be very hypocritical when it comes to their faith, is I think the most I do is just sort of have a slight lack of respect for them, because I don't like hypocrites in general. And it mostly just, I don't necessarily treat them differently, I just don't really have any respect for them. Although you could probably argue that when you have a lack of respect for certain people, it eventually starts changing the way that you act and talk to them. But they're just not people that I end up being around a lot. So, because I can't really be around people that well, one are just hypocrites, but that I just have no respect for because they say one thing and then they do another.
Just, again, another, actually,
Oh, no. You started to go.
Flip a coin.
Just another question on the question.
Are you trying to imply that,
Are you concerned about your safe zone within, amongst the people that loved and helped you?
Did you say safe zone?
Yes, like
What is
safety to.
Yeah, I'd say that.
Because like, in that context, I can understand that as well, that my answer would change. But it's still somewhat, but you still haven't helped them bad, but you just don't trust them. That's within safe zone. If you're implying within, that's what you're implying about, it's your safety with them.
Like I said, I do have a hard time coming out to my family that I'm atheist, so.
I was gonna say, like, I have friends that are more like hypocritical Christians, and like, but I just like talk to them about religion a lot, and then I try to like get them to sort of acknowledge like what their views really are and like why they identify as Christian and stuff like that. And I think like getting a conversation out of them about religion really like helps me understand their point of view better, and like my point of view better too, along with that.
Sounds cool.
And, Craig, right there.
So I would think you definitely need to do a risk and reward assessment, whether it's worth bringing up. For me, if that happened, not your case, because I'm already out, it's just whether I feel like debating and fighting with this person for apparently no reason really, because you're not going to get anywhere. So for me, my risk assessment comes down to how much I enjoy conversing with this person, and I'm thinking of my grandparents as well, and whether it's worth it, even if you do start making progress. Was it worth the stress and emotional stress of pushing forward this conversation? For me, I know I'm not going to move my grandparents anywhere, and there's not a whole lot of benefit to doing it if I could. So it doesn't come up with them very often, although they do know I'm out as an atheist.
Yeah, I'd mainly say that when it comes to a lot of people that happen to be hypocritical, it's like, how can I take you seriously? How can you be a living example of everything that's right when you don't even do what you say it is? I've been annoyed by a few people who claim to be just so Christian, and yet finally I got to the point where I had said, when do you actually do most of the things that you say that your religion is all about? And they're kind of like, well, I said, I'm an atheist. I've volunteered at with the Salvation Army's daycare, despite the fact that they were religious. I've helped with some of the food drives and all the stuff that we could do around our communities. I did a free daycare thing where I watched and came up with a bunch of things for all these kids while their parents were thinking about enrolling them in school, even though I'd really want to say, please don't come to this school, they'll ruin your life. But I did all those things, and yet most of the other people were going off smoking, drinking, doing all kinds of stuff. Not that any of that's really bad. I know most of us do that already. But when they're claiming on, it's like, oh yeah, well, our community does this, or Christians believe in doing this. When do you actually do any of that? Are you actually a good person? Do you really take these views into mind? And it's changed a couple of them for the better, because they realized I should probably start following what my faith believes in, because I said you shouldn't be saying I'm a Christian, because when you say you're a Christian, it doesn't mean you're a good person.
Right. I think that's something that will be addressed a little bit later too in his presentation with the black pastors. You'll see some interesting things.
So it's not a bad question after all, huh?
I didn't think
Well,
it
it
was.
was scary.
It was scary.
It was scary.
Under the bus you have fallen, sir.
I thought
I like it.
There,
It's
that's
a
just stretch. Oh, that was just stressful.
I like that question, actually.
I'll continue. All right, so the black church. One of the things that doesn't matter when it comes to race is that anytime you have high levels of poverty, the people tend to be more religious. It's just how it goes. You know, if you're poor and you don't have like, how can I say it? If you're living in a state of poverty where you don't see no kind of opportunity nowhere, you live in like the worst part of town. You hear shootings, you know, outside your window every night. It's not safe to walk around, you know, and you're living paycheck to paycheck. It's one of the things that religion offers is that, you know, if I work hard and if I'm a good person, then when I die, I want to be rewarded. I mean, like, you know, when they describe heaven and paradise, I mean, it's like freaking Hawaiian punch, you know, water fountains and stuff. I mean, you get 70 virgins, you get a planet. So I mean, like a lot of these different religions, they offer this sense of hope, and when in a lot of these people's lives, there just isn't. I mean, it's a little depressing, but just the way it is. And a lot of times in the black communities, the black church is the centerpiece of the community, where people go and they socialize, they hang out. That's where they organize to, you know, have community events. So to be an atheist in the black community is almost like, oh, like, I mean, how can you? It's almost to a extent like, how can you be involved in your own community, because religion and the church is so intertwined. All right, so one thing I want to talk about when it comes to the black church is that, sorry, a lot of the black churches, they preach what's called the prosperity gospel. It's basically a Christian religious doctrine that, you know, you get financial blessing, or when a Christian does, you know, good, he donates to the church, and let me reiterate, he donates to the church, then he will receive, you know, monetary rewards for, you know, being not just giving money. I don't know. All right, so a lot of black preachers today live in luxury, where the places that they preach in are in like a huge, like a large state of poverty. So, for instance, you have some pastors who are worth $30 million and they preach in South Central LA. Let's just go off of this, bro. Some of these pastors. Thank you. I blame you. Fired. Alright, I already said that. Keep going. Alright, so let's start off the list with Charles Blake. He preaches in West Angeles Church of God in Christ. He earns $900,000 a year on a 10,000-foot mansion in Beverly Hills, while most of the congregation lives in impoverished South Central LA. The church has 20,000 members, and the median annual income is $28,000 a year. This guy, Creflo Dollar, senior pastor at pastor of the World Changers Church International with a net worth of $27 million. Damn! He leads one of the nation's largest mega churches located in College Park, Georgia. And, that's where my family's from. And he even has his own TV show on cable network. His home, $1 million Atlanta home, drives a Rolls Royce, is transported by a private jet, has a $2.5 million Manhattan apartment. You know the annual income of College Park, Georgia is? About $30,000 a year. Alright. Eddie Long, he's another preacher who's from Atlanta. He has a net worth of $5 million. Basically, a newspaper investigated him, and he said that he has a $1.4 million 6-bedroom, 9-bath home on 20 acres in Lithuania, and he has a $350,000 Bentley. He makes about $1 million a year. And the people in Lithuania, Georgia, their annual incomes are, Lithuania, Georgia, their average incomes are 25 grand a year. I think there's one more. Oh, one of my favorites. He's a hustler. All right, T.D. Jakes, a Texan pastor with a net worth of $18 million. He runs a church that has 30,000 members in Dallas. He has what is that, cable network? Yeah. And he has been called America's best preacher by Time Magazine, featured on his cover, lives in a $1.7 million mansion in Dallas, and the income is actually above the others, was $57,000, but he's actually pretty famous because he has his own TV show. Oh, and they even have TV shows of these guys living in Appalachia. Let's play this, Carrie. What you guys' reaction to, do you guys think it's criminal? Let's try to make it. Harry and Chris first. I'm changing my mind.
Where are you pointing to? Okay, yeah. That part where they were like sitting at the table and he's like talking to his wife or whatever, like it just seemed like he became so arrogant. And even like when the guy was talking, the one white guy where he's like, you know, the Bible says this, and you can interpret that as, you know, the preachers are supposed to be taking care of it. It's like they justify that they're rich. Like other people, like P. Diddy, whatever, they're rich because they make music, and they're trying to say like we deserve to be rich because we're talking about religious crap, and it's like,
No, they're both in the entertainment business.
yeah. They're trying to pretend like they're not, though.
Yeah, I know, but Frank Zappa may have put it best when he said, it's easy to pretend you're in show business with the Bible. This isn't about religion.
Yeah.
This is entertainment.
But they're like trying to justify, which is kind of really.
Yeah, well, human beings, that's one of our defining qualities. We rationalize and justify.
Yeah.
Well, can I ask you real quick? One of the pastors featured in that show, he has 2 churches that are like 100 miles away, and guess how he gets back and forth on
Private
Sunday?
jet.
He has a helicopter. He has a helipad.
Which are more expensive to maintain than airplanes.
Yes, they are.
And also, there's even pastors like this in Akron who preach in areas like, you know, Copley Road, East Side, South Side, North Side, who like, the communities themselves, they're impoverished, and then these people, they pull in like 100,000, 200,000. There's like a black preacher who has like a chain of churches, and he just opened up one by my mom's house, and he's worth a couple $1 million. All right, question.
I thought it was interesting / problematic how one of the preachers was saying, I feel like a group of black people, like, you can be leaders, God can help you be a leader, like, you with God, you can, like, change the world, like, why do you, like, you're telling them that you need God in order to, like, be productive or to be leaders in society.
Oh, wait, oh.
Yeah, I'm not totally convinced it's all just show business. Because, I mean, take, like, cold reading psychics. For an analogous example, I mean, a lot of them, you know, are obviously just, you know,
Hustlers.
Yeah, but some of them actually believe that they can read minds and talk to the dead. They're so far down the rabbit hole that they believe that their, you know, psychological tricks are actually supernatural abilities. I don't think it's too far of a stretch that at least some of these, like, you know, mega pastors are engaged in that level of rationalization and, you know, compartmentalization, especially, you know, with religion, people do this kind of rationalization. They say, okay, I know this religion is true, now how do I, you know, rationalize and explain this? Say, okay, I know I should be living this lifestyle, so how do I rationalize and explain this? Oh, look, I have the Bible to help me out along the way. You know, you can justify anything.
So, if a lot of these pastors are going out teaching to really poor areas, I wonder, like, they're probably not pulling up in their Mercedes or whatever, but I wonder how the people there would respond if they knew how loaded these guys are.
You go to any church in Akron, you will see the pastors, and they'll have the most nicest car in the parking lot, while everyone else is driving like.
So I'm like,
How do people not see that?
yeah, exactly, like, it's not like they go
People see
there
what they wanna see.
with their money
They
and be
think
like,
it's
here, I'm gonna give you something, or I'm
That's the
gonna set
whole
up like a
started from the
food
Bob
kitchen or
Shower
something.
concept, like, and I
Yeah.
because it's like they
Like,
base
they're
it
not
back
even
and
putting
pull
us
it
back
back
in the
from that
community,
spot.
they're not even being like, I'm gonna make a soup kitchen, I'm gonna, like, build a shelter or something, they're just like, no, I'm just gonna buy my Mercedes and.
I'm not gonna bring people into my house and give them a place
Yeah.
to live and stuff to eat.
Exactly.
I own and Nick and Austin.
I'll even try and find the little saying there, but there was always something about saying like a righteous man is more, or I can't remember what it was called.
It's easier for a camel to get through the eye of the needle than it is for a rich man to get in heaven.
No, not that one. It's that basically, what's worse, and I think it's called like a bullshitter is less dangerous than a believer, because a bullshitter knows that what they're saying is bullshit. They are essentially a liar, but at least they know that it is a lie. A believer is far more dangerous because they actually think what they're saying is true. And they're far more dangerous than anyone can be. One of the things I actually liked was from True Blood, which is when one of the queens had said, they're like, well, wait a minute. Are you saying that this woman became a Maenad simply because she wanted to be a Maenad, like sacrificing people and killing them to serve her bull god lover? And she said, everything that came into existence because it wanted to be that way. She said, and he's like, he didn't understand. She said, never underestimate the power of blind faith. And I kept thinking, God, that's so true, because blind faith flies people into buildings. And it makes people homicidal maniacs who justify it in the name of an invisible God. Blind faith does horrible things, and that's what that's what's dangerous about these guys, is they actually, they know that what they're doing is technically wrong, but they also believe that what they're doing is the truth. It is everything. It actually is real. And that's why they're able to take advantage of people.
Okay, mind you, I just walked in here. So it's kind of like I'm kind of jumping in on the middle of a conversation.
You basically watch the Preachers of LA, and then we discuss the history of it.
Now, in terms of that, Christians typically don't like TV shows like this, not at all. I'm a Christian, and I can tell you that shows like the show with Mary and them, it doesn't shed a good light for Christianity. Now, when you're talking about preachers, understand, like the church I go to, the Word Church. Now, granted, he has 6 locations in one church.
How much money does he have? Because the Word Church is on. There's one on Brighton Road, like by my mom's house.
Yeah, they're building it. Now, mind you, the scripture says, "For the love of money is root of all evil." That's what is just what the scripture says. And so, I don't think someone well off is well off, because not a lot of preachers just preach. They have other jobs as well. So from what you're saying about them maybe having a Mercedes, okay, that's one thing if they were only preaching, but if they're preaching and then doing something else, then that's something you have to understand too.
Well, you're like, these guys got a letter back there, but, okay, but to go back to your point about them having second jobs, a lot of these pastors, they work off of salaries from the church, and these salaries are exorbitant. I mean, I can understand if their salaries were, tied to how much the people make in that certain community, or maybe like average, household income, like maybe $50,000-$60,000 a year. That would be acceptable, but you have some pastors who are $1 million a year. They're preaching that, your condition is going to get better if you just pray, and I mean, people have been praying for hundreds of years, and a lot of times these conditions haven't changed at all. So I mean, like, how? It's just like a lot of these pastors. It's it's almost criminal what they're doing. You know what I'm saying? It's like how are you wanting to sell a product to someone, or like try to tell someone that's living in this kind of poverty and then you want to live. You're not even going to live in that community. You want to live in like, you know, we had like a couple slides where a couple of these pastors lived in like, you know, $1 million mansions, and these people are living in, you know, paycheck to paycheck.
Really quick, for Nick, what we were going on right before this was specifically the pastors who make tens of millions of dollars and preach in areas where people make a median of about $25,000 a year. We weren't talking about your average preacher.
I wanted to understand like what this is going on.
Yeah, those were the slides right before this that you missed out on. I caught on to that.
Yeah. Okay. Understand because the only megachurch that's in Akron is the Word Church, technically. And he understand, like the churches that he has are technically in debt because of how much money that's put into it. Now mind you, a lot of the tithes go into paying the bills of the church. That's just kind of like how it was explained to me, that they go into like paying the buildings. If it's a mega church, there might be multiple buildings, then money is going into the buildings. And there are some times where, I can only speak for Vernon, he's bought some of his members' car or has built in a house. It's money that of his own money, he's putting into.
I'm not saying that they don't do this
So
stuff.
he's one of the good ones.
Yeah, that's like they should all do.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, what range of Christian are you?
I am.
Like, are you non-denominational, Catholic?
Protestant, Catholic, Presbyterian.
I will say I say I'm about Buddhism because it's hard to put a label on it because it's a stigma behind a lot of names. But like with Baptist, there's a stigma behind that. The Baptist you believe one thing that doesn't necessarily mean for everything else.
Don't worry about the technicalities.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So that'd be like non-denominational,
Yeah, you can say that.
non-denominational Christian. Okay.
Oh, Lindsay.
Okay, there's within that clip, and even within like that show Creatures of LA, there's an eerie racial undertone there as well. You have this stage, you have a majority black pastor showing living the good life, and we can sit here and yes, those who have actually looked to us say, yes, these are people that are exploiting these people. These are the people that are exploiting their own community and their own faith. Why should we still trust them to this day? Are you starting to notice the undertones there now?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was maybe not direct objective, but I'm pretty sure you can even escape the people producing it. So I think within that show, there's an agenda to discredit those in the black community, even if they are faith or not, to show that they don't know how to practice religion as good as others might believe.
Any other comments? All right. Move on.
I just wanted to go back to quotes about slavery, and at least in our country's history, the justification of slavery and how it was mostly imposed on African Americans. Would you like to say something?
Yeah. I learned a little bit about this in African study, and we've kind of had a similar debate about this. And basically, granted, the Quakers and Puritans did use faith to enslave black Africans and black people. However, you can't necessarily blame the religion for how people preach it. It's because everything in the Bible is contextual, and
What's the context of owning slaves?
Owning slaves in any context is still fucked
It
up.
is,
Even
it is.
if it's not racial, because I believe not all of the Bible quotes about slavery pertain to race. It's usually any people in general. I think there's also specific rules for if it's a fellow Jew, but still, under any context, slavery is
But I feel like
still
a
wrong.
lot of these are taken out of context. Like,
Only enslaved, how's that being taken out of context?
well,
I mean, it's just like friends with benefits or what?
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 Like friends, like, you know, they work for free and they, you know, get beaten or something.
Well, understand,
Like,
Exodus was, let me tell you a little bit about, let me
me
say a little bit about Exodus. Exodus,
That's
yes,
not a
there
slave.
were, there were slaves in Exodus, but you gotta understand something. That was the time, and they were never saying that slavery was okay. It was just something that happened. So it's not necessarily saying that slavery was okay. It was that it happened. And if you read this story in full, then you'd see that Moses had delivered them out of slavery under the Egyptians.
Well, to that story though, historically speaking, that's like a work of fiction. There's no proof of that large amount of people.
I'm not going to debate that. What I'm saying is that a lot of those are taken way out of context, and so.
Let's go on to the.
Is it me? I think you had your hand up first. Then
I'll
I'll
just
go.
I mean, like, we get to what you're saying, that nowhere in the Bible does it say it's okay to own other African Americans. It definitely condones slavery. There's definitely sanctions put forth by the Bible on how to do it. It's not like it was an accident that just kind of the culture accepted it. The Bible actually describes how to do it properly. I mean,
Selling,
that
buying.
in itself is sanctioning slavery. You know.
And aren't these commandments directly given from God in these books of the Bible?
I think that's not the debate we're having right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
When you say it's out of context, can you name a context when it's okay?
Yeah, that's
Any, like,
I'm not saying
even
that.
if-
I'm not saying that slavery is okay. That's not what I'm saying.
That's
What
kind
I'm-
of what they're
When
saying.
the Bible says
It's
it's
not.
okay.
No, you can, I mean, you can finish something.
Yeah. What I'm saying is that it's taken a lot out of context and different people take it different ways. It's not necessarily like from what I've read from Leviticus and from Exodus. Now mind you, you gotta understand something. That's Old Testament. That is something that was,
You accept the Old Testament?
no.
Why?
Well,
Why?
I do, but then understand, like, if you accept everything, if you take it in a literal sense, then you'd all be dead, because I cut my hair, like in Leviticus 19, it says that you can't cut your hair to a certain length. I cut my hair all the time.
Yeah.
So it's something, it doesn't make sense for the 21st century.
I mean, well, how do you choose which parts of the Old Testament then that are good ones and which ones are bad ones?
I'm looking those up now, so let me get back to you.
Sure.
Lindsay? Wait, I'm sorry. Are we? Alright, it was Lindsay, then what?
Oh, that's alright. I lowered my hand.
Okay. Good. Sorry.
How does, I mean, maybe we could fast forward to maybe something today, and how does religiosity affect the Black community now regarding regarding progression for civil rights today? Like, for example, I'm not sure if you might talk about it or not, but the new wave of, within Ferguson area, when someone was leading a speech in the groups were leading speeches in St. Louis, you had people coming from the churches and national and Islamic groups. But the new younger generation was actually rejecting their help because they did not want their voices in that movement. They wanted a secular approach, and that's how some people have interpreted it like that, indicating that maybe with this new progression of trying to obtain trying even to provide equal, I guess, like, in a sense of what's going on like with Ferguson. By the way, before I go on, does anyone know what's actually happening going on over there?
Yes.
Yes.
Violence.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like currently, or
Yeah,
or something changed in the past like week?
No, like
Okay.
in general.
Yeah, like the shooting and the
So far they're investigating whether or not if Michael attacked the officer.
like if the officer was in the
Yeah.
justifiable.
Yeah.
What, 6 bullets in a man on the
Yeah, that's
They're
still insane.
trying.
Yes.
I know that in Ferguson there was a case where the police shot a black man. But there's a couple of those. Yeah, there's been plenty of.
The big thing though is that their entire community
But
coming together.
just to go back on the racial tensions, for those who are trying to speak out against it, there were leaders from churches and religious groups that wanted to be like leaders and give speeches against the civil rights era of the 1960s. They rejected that. They didn't want that. Yeah, the people leading the activists that are leading they didn't want those speeches. They didn't want to repeat the same mistakes they did in the civil rights era because to them it's like, well, not everything is solved. We're not going to repeat what we did before because all it's going to do is lead to some problems anyway. So why don't we take a new approach? So some people have been looking at this and saying that there might be a new secular approach to social justice.
Oh, no, I have my hand up, sorry.
Any other commentary? Anyone else? Gary? Okay. Alright, so today, actually I want to get into like the actual black atheist part. For a lot of African Americans, to me, black and African American is like interchangeable. So if anyone in here who is of that racial designation, whatever, I just use it interchangeably. Sorry if that offends you or something. But alright, so with that being said, a lot of times people think black being an atheist is, for a lot of people, that sounds like oxymoron, like two contradictory terms being put together. And I can say from, my time around other African Americans that there are a lot of people who don't believe in what they've been told, but they're just so scared because of like the social pressure from, their family, friends, community. I was playing basketball one time and I said, one of the dudes, I think he's like 17 or 18, he's pretty smart, but a lot of it, he said all Christian or atheists, can you tell us about that? The shock on people's faces, they were like, oh my gosh, are you like possessed? So you don't believe in God. And then this one dude was like, do you know they have scientific proof of demons? And I was like, bro. It's just, and a lot of times, due to the disproportionate amounts of like educational opportunity in the black community, where a lot of African Americans, the high school dropout rates are a lot higher in our communities. A lot of people, they believe in a lot of pseudoscience, which enforces a lot of their reasons for being religious. I have people asking me, why there's no God, how do you wake up in the morning? And when I first heard that question, I said well, I'm not a sleep doctor, but from my basic understanding, I just said that your body needs rest, so you better take to sleep or something. That's my understanding about it. And they would ask me questions, and I remember at a bus stop there was an older black gentleman who, it was a couple years ago. He was saying that if there's no God, how do we have all these trees and he literally said how do we have the sky and the tree and all sorts of other shrubbery and shit, and he generally didn't know how the science works, when it comes to these kind of things. Really asking me stuff that I learned in 10th grade for real. And I think that one of the ways that you can have more people come out, or more people see the light, and no offense to people who are black and Christians, but I think a lot of times this just has to do with people educating themselves on the world around them, the natural world around them, understanding into the world around you, and it's so much more fulfilling that that you're like a speck in a bucket of water when it comes to the universe or something like that, or some catchy term.
We're all just stardust.
Yeah, we're all just stardust, and we have some hands being raised now, so awesome.
Yeah, it's like when I was a kid, I would try to explain things within like a biblical sense or whatever, like trying to figure out how the world worked. But I feel like it gave me more of an appreciation finding out like why it rains, how like the math behind various things and the scientific explanations for natural phenomena. And I think it gave me a much better appreciation for what's going on in the world around me than just simply thinking, oh, like this is why. I'm not going to look for a further explanation. Like, I want to know in depth and detail, like, why is that happening? And if anything, it's made the world more of a beautiful place than anything.
Oh, no. Okay. Yeah, I've come across that idea where, like, if there's no God, then, like, I think there was like a parody of like Mythbusters where they were busting the idea of God, and then at the end they're like, oh, so there's no God, and they're like, oh, and then they have this really sad sigh, and I'm like, I've never understood that. I'm like, if I believe that there's no God, why does that make the world a sad place? All it means is that there's no one pulling the strings and things happen. And it's not like things happen for. Yeah, like I am in charge of my own destiny. You know, I'm gonna take responsibility for what I want to do, and it's not like God has a plan for you. I'm like, no, I'm making my own fucking plan, and I'm gonna believe what I believe is right because I believe it, not because it's in some book.
When it comes to not only Christianity, but I'm also looking a lot at like Buddhism, at Hinduism, at other forms of religion, like or philosophies, if you may, is that all of it is to complete the idea of being enough. Like no one is supposed to be enough without a religion, no one is supposed to be enough without a God, no one's supposed to be enough until this deity says that they are enough. And so what I've seen with a lot of religion is that the reasoning that these religions give to why the world works or why someone is who they are is so that the explanation is enough. Like with a lot of religions, they like even with like those in Africa, those with Native Americans, they needed an explanation for everything. But now that we have science, now that we have links to everything, like there are still things in the Bible that just because they were reasoning to say that it was enough for things to make sense, things have a further, this is like word vomit right now, I'm losing my words. But it's like, I mean, the sense of enoughness has now altered. We have found different reasoning and we have progressed. And when we take the Bible and we use these different, contexts and everything, it's like interpreting the Constitution. It's like, how far can you go to say that this will still justify everything when there's hard facts right there now? Like, I don't understand. Hold on. Like, how is religion enough now? Because I don't think religion is enough anymore. I think it's science now, because we have found that we fulfill ourselves without a deity. We are enough without this other figure. That's the whole thing. That's what I found. Like, hold on, I'm just losing my words. Sorry, never mind.
Oh, you good, bro? Lindsay?
It seems that within the label right there, again, correct me if I'm wrong, because I can only go by my own experiences and what I hear and what I see from experience of my friends. It seems like there's a dichotomy between going by your culture and then going through the state. The culture being that you are raised in this huge community that has had a legacy of Christianity, a religiously of following the Bible to the T. And then maybe you're seeking towards like a more secular space, and when you're in America, that secular space would like to, as we like to see and as is reflected within our Constitution, to separation church and state. So states become our most objective sense. But at the same time, how the state has been constructed in our law has not actually been favorable to non-white groups. So, and I go through, I can't speak for you, but I can only speak for myself as a Latino woman and deist. Because within those two, I don't find protections from any of them culturally because they don't like the fact that I'm feminist. They don't like the fact that I don't believe the same God as they do. And then I could go to state, which I used to believe was objective and was secular, but the truth, the reality is, it's a system that has not exactly been in my favor for some time. How's that been similar to you?
This is so much. I don't know. I can say that like a lot of like the culture in like the black community and when it comes to religion, and it's just so intertwined to me that I don't know. It's like buying like stuff and you don't want it made in China, but it's like everything's made in China because like. And it's sort of like in the black community, everything within the black community, there's always some sort of religious tie to it. And it's like you really can't get away from it. You know what I'm saying? It's just so entrenched or whatever. Any other questions? Alright. think are the differences and the reasons for blacks and whites coming out as atheists?
Wonder if there's, it seems to me like there's more white celebrities that were out as atheists. And the only famous black atheist that I can think of is Neil deGrasse Tyson. That everybody can do.
He doesn't claim it though.
Oh. So maybe then.
Morgan Freeman, although he's kind of limited.
Yeah, he is well.
Yeah. I mean,
But just figureheads.
Yeah.
Samuel Jackson's whatever Samuel Jackson.
I know Morgan Freeman. I think could be.
Think of. Actually, no, maybe Lisa Thomas, but I don't. She's not like a household. Her name's not like a household.
I like that answer.
Yeah.
I don't think the reasons for them coming out as atheists are different because, I mean, obviously, atheists generally have the same reasoning for being atheists. I think a better question would be like, actually, why don't black people come out as atheists? Because there's a lot of family things, like you were saying, because it's so tied in the community. If you were to come out, it's so much worse. And there are even white people who are in that position. I think it just depends on your social situation as to whether or not you can or can't.
I'm not good at questioning.
No, I think the question is fine, and I mean, there's a distinction between the differences for being, the reasons for being an atheist and the reasons for coming out as an atheist. And I think that's the distinction here, and implying that there's a different climate as far as, you know, coming out in the white community versus coming out in the black community, or black or a non-black community. I honestly feel very, very ignorant in this topic. I think both because I am not black or part of, you know, a strong black community, and that my parents are actually pretty accepting of my atheism, and I don't really have a lot of experience in the situation where, you know, I'd be persecuted or thrown out on the streets or something, or disowned by my family or something like that. I think that tends to be a lot more prevalent in the South too than, you know, here.
My answer, I guess, kind of relates to science because all my answers do because I love it. But I watched an interview with Neil deGrasse Tyson where someone asked him about his history, and I guess I would say, to sum up the answer, is that blacks wouldn't be as exposed to the sciences or as accepting to the sciences by their community. And he gave an awesome story about, I mean, he's a huge guy and he used to be a wrestler at Harvard. And when he was on the wrestling team, there was like a guy 2 years older than him who was just the coolest hotshot, and Neil looked up to him and everything. And once he told him that, like, he's going to be an astrophysicist, the guy that he looked up to and all the coaches there were like blown away, like, you're a strong black man, like, why would you want to do something like that? Why wouldn't you want to do like a sport or something else? And I mean, he loves astrophysics, obviously.
I mean,
So,
Kerry has pictures of him as well.
of Neil? I do too. Yeah, but it's a cool example. I think, I mean, obviously this was a couple years ago, but he was kind of shunned out of joining the sciences. I don't know if that's an outlier or a common thing.
I definitely think that there's an associated history for different types of communal debates by race. Like, especially when you think about, like when I think about white people, when I think about religion, I think about everything that happened in Europe and that led to, you know, different schisms and things like this. And when I think about the black community, I don't really see a very clear history of any of that yet. I don't feel like it's been as prominent, or if we've had a paradigm shift where things like that have happened. So I think it's more in its inception in the black community than it is in the community.
Next one. Here's some black atheist organizations if you want to look them up. And also there's a lot of Facebook groups, you know, if you guys want to, you know, see what black atheists talk about, there's a couple of them, like, I think one's just called Black Atheists, Black Non-Believers. I think there's some other atheist groups that are like, but I mean, there's lots of white people in them anyways, but a lot of the stuff that they discuss in the groups and stuff, there's a lot of stuff that has to do with, like, stuff, particularly the black people and religion and atheism. So you guys can join. You don't have to be black to join the atheist group. But
No one's gonna kick us out?
no. Okie dokie, thanks.
Quick, shield your eyes.
The light.
Dude, I don't.